Hello everyone and welcome to the final game of our match between Gameslayer and Cat. We are revisiting a series this time, and prices are a lot different this time. Very low across the board except water, uranium, and iron.
Yeah, looking at it, Chem Colony, decent enough scavenger spot in the middle. You might want to definitely goon that carbon though. Same thing in the top left.
Bottom right definitely has a very nice patch of metals. Not too much else going on there though. Some ice, I guess, some aluminum. It should be a workable found. There's a lot of interesting salt in the top right with some water, but very little else.
Gameslayer wants it. Cat going for top left scavenger.
Those are definitely the two founds that make the most sense. There's just not enough building material anywhere else.
The uranium and the iron have an adjacency bonus, so that's going to be a lot of money just straight up in Gameslayer's pocket, but it's going to quickly collapse the price of uranium, and there's not going to be enough demand anytime soon to make it justify it.
It will get him to a very quick HQ2. It should let him move into steel pretty easily from there, but his plan afterward. See, water is definitely
not as much steel demand as you might expect since Cat has gone scavenger, so it's going to be interesting to see what he ends up doing, because a lot of the ideas for how to deal with this involve just making a bunch of steel, and that'll only really get you back the money you already put in the market.
Right. I'm also very interested in seeing where Cat goes from here. She went ahead and grabbed that goon you were talking about. Very important to protect the carbon. But right now she's also just moving into 4 aluminum tiles. I'm not sure where she's going to make the money. Oh, no, those are ice condensers. Never mind. That makes a lot more sense. It's still going to be a little difficult for her if she needs to get even more money by producing life support, which probably isn't going to be a thing since prices started so low. But her tiles are not set up in a way where that's an easy position.
Pirates.
So
I hate those filthy bandits.
don't know. It's probably not going to be a big deal either way, but
Right, she should be completely fine since Gameslayer opted to go all out in steel. No competition in that water market. Should be plenty for that 40 glass.
yeah. Meanwhile, spending 3,000 on pirates to get yourself about 100 water, I mean, it's good, but you're expecting that market to crash, and it's only really helping you mitigate debt.
It's a very slow draw of that 100 water. It's definitely not the sort of play you like to see in 1v1 generally. It ends up taking its effect too gradually, doesn't slow your opponent down enough, and that 3k sets you back quite a bit.
It's one thing if you've got a scientist who's maybe trying to get fancy with their shipping and sending some electrolysis or some farm food over the skies, but a little bit of water, it's more difficult to make that play work if you don't have a bunch of money around already.
Right. I'm pretty concerned about what Cat's doing here. She ended up replacing 2 of her carbon tiles with those electrolysis reactors, something that I was saying would have been awkward just because it covers up her good carbon. She's stuck on the 3 carbon a second, but she's also going to chemicals now. That's going to drain her carbon even more. The surplus will help.
Carbon's gone, yeah.
But,
so, I mean, that's as good of a time to make the play as any. It's technically a chem colony, even if the price on chems really aren't good enough right now to... I guess it's to mitigate the cost of glass. I'm thinking that's the thought here. The price on chems is similar to the price on glass. You can make more chems than I think you can make glass.
It should be the same amount. But yeah, it does mean that Cat is left with only just 2 carbon a second. Which is going to slow her upgrades down quite a bit. She's not in any power at this point. Power is going crazy because neither player is doing anything about that except Gameslayer is going to these nuclear plants now, and that should do a lot for him. And maybe this game Cat will be the one in the +6 debt.
Well then, Cat will win.
I'm not so sure about that one. There's only so many times you can pull something like that off. I'm also concerned that Cat is just auto-selling these chems right now. There's no reason for that. The price should be rising. I think Cat knows better.
Well, that was a decent enough hit on the nuclear plants. That'll keep Gameslayer from doing more than kind of paying out his own debt.
Right. Luckily for him, he does have this last nuclear plant gooned. It still gets the adjacency from the other two. But yeah, it's going to keep the power price higher for longer. Cat is finally going to solar panels now. They're going to be really expensive. Like we saw last game, they're also not going to be tremendously effective. The nuclear plants on the aluminum will be more helpful.
Gameslayer making all his money in iron right now. Has to shut his steel mills down. Steel is way, way cheap.
Yeah, definitely got very lucky there with the random iron shortage. It's going to do a lot to keep him ahead here. Very nice.
The circuit overloads are getting more expensive, and they aren't getting more effective.
Definitely still more effective than the power surge would be. They just last so long. Curious who is going to end up being the one to get the most out of this high power price. With the constant overloads being traded back and forth, neither player has really gotten an advantage there yet, though Gameslayer's definitely better positioned. More money and lower debt.
Though, Cat is paying off more per second right now. And as the price looks to be falling, that means Cat might be getting the better of this, or at least was right up until she decided she needed to spend $20,000 in debt on financial instruments.
Right. In the moment, it doesn't seem like a tremendously useful patent. It does convert a bit of debt to cash, but Gameslayer not in all that much debt. Maybe it's just a bet on her opponent being Gameslayer, though.
18,000 was probably about what that patent was worth.
Yeah,
How much can you realistically expect to get from it?
I think I'm generally nervous to push much past 16 or even 12,000, depending on how deeply in debt my opponent is already. Okay. Well, Gameslayer is the first to 4, ends up picking up this high silicon.
Cat will be there as soon as she can scrape together 4,000 though. She's halfway there.
Silicon will be doing very good work for Gameslayer, setting him up to go into this glass market, which neither player has been able to until now. Also going into food. Very slowly
might expect to see Gameslayer switching out of that steel and into electrolysis.
I think it's reasonable for him to stick in the steel. It is only $16 right now, but considering how much he'll want for the upgrade, that true value of steel is considerably higher. And here at Space, I think we're seeing like the long-term impact of the whole early transition to electrolysis. Just very awkward claims in that area.
Yeah. Gameslayer, first to make power money.
Gotta make all of maybe 2,000? Probably a
Celebrates
little
by
bit more.
nuking Cat. Always a good thing to do.
Should be very helpful there. Both players in the food market now. Only 2 farms apiece is a bit interesting considering both of them do have significant stockpiles of water, and the food price is so good.
This might be one of those times where you want to start pirating Gameslayer Silicon. It's not going to be great, but it's probably the best you're going to do, and Cat needs that silicon to start getting into glass. The price on it has just become too much.
That is definitely reasonable. The other option I think might be to push into a patent lab. You can look at transparent aluminum, you can look at slant drilling. Both options would do a lot to help Cat out. This
The problem with that is
a crazy price for nuclear engine.
Yeah, not much else to say about that, but
It does
with
save
the price of fuel where it's at, I mean, it makes sense.
makes some sense. I think long term it's not really something you expect to be worthwhile, but
Gameslayer's got the capacity to take the debt, that's for sure.
right, and there was very little no money to be made in power for now, so it's not really too costly, I suppose. Gameslayer, like last game, going to a fairly early hacker array. Hacking up glass should be very good for him. As we highlighted earlier, Cat just does not have a good path into that.
No, this is pretty much standard forcing a Monopoly 101 behavior.
So they're also just managing to get to HQ5 first. Even with most of his base shut down, he is the expansive. He does have a lot of production.
One thing I might like to see out of Gameslayer would be a goon down on his Silicon. He now knows that that Silicon's the linchpin of his victory right now.
Let's get our science on.
Yeah, that's probably right. This... yeah. Keep wanting
Basically,
to...
if he can maintain that Silicon, really difficult for me to see a way for Kat to get back in this because she just can't make the transition she'd need to make.
I mean, there are definitely options for Kat to get into that market. I'm not really sure what's going on there, though. Like, Kat...
She's going for teleportation.
Teleportation seems like a strange first choice to me. When there's slant drilling,
Thinking
when there's...
is the price on fuel in her debt. That's... yeah.
Maybe. It doesn't feel like a big enough thing yet. Especially since she's not shipping all that much, just mostly from the few water tiles. So it's not going to be a huge impact.
Gameslayer intelligently getting aggressive, forcing Kat to spend her money on things that aren't an upgrade. That just enforces the gap between the two right now, even more so.
Right, Gameslayer already having the long-term advantage, being the expansive, having... I'm not sure about the Pleasure Dome, but
202 per second.
It's okay, but we're also in series and there are a lot of prices that I think are reasonably similar. Once you subtract off the power cost of that, you're not really gaining very much over just any old building.
Looks like Gameslayer's putting up some nuclear plants, thinking about that himself.
Energy Vault should help Cat keep up on energy better. It should make all these power plays a bit weaker. But yeah, Cat just
20,000.
needs to figure something out here. Hack Array also especially good for Gameslayer this game, having the natural monopolies in iron and steel. So even if other markets get entered, you know, then he still has those open.
Yeah. Cat losing money on those farms officially.
Going for liquid batteries will help keep the water price more reasonable, except she's now switched to slant drilling, which is good, finally, but also problematic. He has gone ahead and nuked out Gameslayer's Silicon, which means that the slant drilling is off this single low over here, and that's also just vulnerable. It's all very awkward for Cat right now. Gameslayer going for an offload. I cannot see a way that makes a ton of sense. 25k launches.
Look how much steel he's got. Just sitting around. Yes. There comes a point where you've got so much of a resource that making more of it doesn't matter, because even if you sold it all, it'd be down to $1 a unit. So maybe spend some of it on an off-world.
I don't know that I buy that, though. Not with glass over 300, electronics pushing 300.
Making glass, though.
And not without any optimizations that are down. Not when you can credibly threaten the buyout on Cat.
The optimization center would be probably the best way for him to be moving forward here, but he is making his money back every second on glass. So it's just a time investment there.
I just don't buy that it's the right choice at the moment.
Let's look at prices. He's got 26, 25,000. He's launching for 22,000 right now.
And there's no launch that's going to be remotely profitable and sustainable without optimizations for him.
Yeah, I'm willing to call it a mistake. I'm willing to say that.
In some ways, I'll just be very sad in a few moments when Gameslayer wins despite building an off-world on series that he shouldn't have built. Okay, it happens.
Also, he got that 218 per second on his pleasure dome. You know. That's the nice thing about a pleasure dome, is that that market is not going to change as long as your opponent doesn't get into the dome business themselves.
Right, 218 will be the maximum it reaches this game unless Gameslayer picks up virtual reality. I don't think there's any good reason for him to go into patent lab for that. Pat should pick up the rest of the useful patents before Gameslayer has a chance, so it would just be a waste of time and try.
Gameslayer gonna want to look at defending himself.
I think the general rule of thumb is just that you don't need to worry about defending yourself until your opponent starts getting aggressive. Keep the money floating to use for hacks, for investments, and that's usually better. But yeah, that is probably the only way he loses this game, so something for him to pay attention to at least. One interesting thing that happened a little bit ago that we didn't say much about, that liquid batteries auction for 36,000 going to Gameslayer. It's something that Kat doesn't really need since she has this slant drilling high water down here. Definitely.
Yeah, it's a feather in Gameslayer's cap though, because he's running all of his liquid off of just these 2 solar condensers.
Right, definitely should be helpful for him. Meanwhile, power is becoming a thing again, thanks to overloads.
Market misinformation in progress.
It'll be interesting to see if anyone tries to make a play off of that. Cat's hacker rate is just idle right now. Power hack could be a very real idea.
Oh.
One other thing that I really hate about Gameslayer's Offworld, it is on top of his only uranium, and uranium is $200 right now. That's just great.
The engineers have advanced our production.
Yeah.
Okay, Kat is going ahead with those power hacks right now. This is somewhere where she has a decisive advantage since Gameslayer made this colossal mistake. And it might be a very, very good way for her to get back into things. Gameslayer already indeed dead. Going to keep plunging further unless he builds more power.
If Kat can push this for another 30 more days, she should make up what she spent on financial instruments.
I should check. How much has she made so far? 5.7k. Yeah, I see no world where that makes sense.
Oh.
It'll pay itself off.
Yes, there was going to be a world where it would make sense, a world where your opponent is gaining 2 to 2.5 debt per second.
Gameslayer's trying. He's 1.1k, 1k now.
2.5 thousand, sorry. Should use words that mean things.
Kat already has this circuit overload bot. She should be dropping at any moment now on these nuclear plants again. And
making $1,000 a second. Not profit yet, but getting there.
I bet Gameslayer does not know that Kat already has another overload, so once these new nuclear plants finish, they'll be nice and shut down too. Look at this power price, $400 a second. This is definitely something you always have to keep track of late game 1v1. Power can go nuts.
Because the minute somebody out there stops making power, the other person gets into a dominant power position. If they just... So it's kind of like a game of chicken, where everybody's not making money, waiting for someone else to break.
It's more or less the easiest way to lose a game where you have a large lead. Just forget about power.
Which, speaking of...
Kat is well on her way to victory here, already at this 93%, 95, any second now. Even though Gameslayer getting those up.
Really well played on Kat's part. Was behind to an expansive at level 5. Not an easy thing to do for a scavenger.
It definitely looked like she was dead in the water for a while, picked up some key patents, and found the play that turned this thing around. Gameslayer making a just enormous mistake here. It cannot be overstated how much this killed him.
So yeah, things to have done: not let the scavenger get slant drilling, nuking the scavenger on their carbon. Hitting this medium would have hit the goon, but there was still plenty of places that you could have done to keep Cat down from ever hitting level 5. Blue's really upset about that uranium.
I think it's very important to point out.
Yeah, alright, Gameslayer, he was upset about that. So yeah, spies! Spies have a timer now.
Yeah.
You should always be using spies. It used to be a lot easier to use spies because if you had a bunch of money together, you could just drop 4 spies easy peasy. Now you gotta wait 15-20 seconds between spies, so taking 4 spies to find a hacker array, a lot more frustrating than it used to be.
Right, definitely still very important in this scenario. When you know your opponent's going to be doing a lot of hacking, being able to anticipate and counter those is really important.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, they're just making so much money.